Welcome, players, to the game dungeon, Zombie Siege. Clearance condition. Obtain the antidote. Target location. In the city center, the first biological laboratory on the blromance floor of the SD Group headquarters. Player's current location. In the suburbs, the SD Biopharmaceutical Factory. Mission difficulty. SSS. Weapons. Random. The game starts now. I wish you all a successful clearance. As soon as the system voice ended, I was face to face with a rotting, pus-oozing dead fisheye. Looking at the zombie running towards me at full speed, I took a deep breath suddenly. Then, I started running for my life. All I did was reject that crazy roommate's confession. Is it really necessary to drag me into this game that's impossible to clear? I cursed David countless times in my heart while frantically tapping on the system watch, hoping to draw a weapon with great lethality, the kind that can wipe out all the zombies. However, the system was completely unresponsive. I couldn't even click on it. The zombie behind me was getting closer and closer, and the strong stench of decay kept drilling into my nose. I couldn't hold it in any longer. Immediately, I covered my chest and vomited violently. Just when I was prepared to meet my end, the zombie suddenly stopped in its tracks. It mechanically tilted its head, let out a few hoarse sounds at me, then shakily covered its rotten face and limped away. As it ran, it also let out shrill screams. I must be crazy. Otherwise, how could I see a zombie showing such a human-like expression? I hadn't recovered from the aftermath of the disaster when a sinister voice suddenly rang in my ear. "Brother, are you okay?" Feeling the warmth against my neck, I caught my breath. That familiar yet eerie voice made me instinctively think of a certain unhinged roommate. So, I let out a sudden scream, jumped 3 feet away, and looked at the approaching person warily. I saw that he was wearing a black tight-fitting suit. His face was covered, and only a pair of inky black eyes were exposed. He looked frail, but the long spear he held in his arms told me not to underestimate him. Once I confirmed it wasn't my crazy roommate David, I let out a sigh of relief and then asked angrily, "Hey, who are you? Didn't you know scaring someone like that could be deadly?" The young man didn't say a word. Instead, he raised his gun and aimed it at my head. My pupils shrank in shock, and I tightly shut my eyes in fear. Right then, there was a loud bang. I heard the sound of the bullet whistling past my ear. However, after waiting for a long time, I didn't feel any pain. Instead, I heard that person laughing. I hesitantly opened my eyes and met his teasing eyes. His expression softened, and he tilted his head in confusion, mirroring the fleeing zombies. "Brother is so timid. How can you avoid those disgusting creatures and get the antidote?" As he finished speaking, he raised an eyebrow at me and glanced behind my back. I instinctively looked back. I saw a zombie lying on the ground, with a large hole in its head. My heart skipped a beat, and I looked at the boy who had saved my life with excitement. So he wasn't a pervert. He was a hero with incredible strength. A wicked thought suddenly popped into my mind. Stick to him. Use him. After getting the antidote, then shake him off mercilessly. Young Master Carter didn't know what I was thinking. Instead, he pulled the black cloth off his face, revealing a handsome visage that could be described as breathtaking. His brow ridge was sharp and defined, his nose straight and high, with dark, deep-set eyes shaped like phoenixes. The most striking feature, however, was a small red mole beneath the outer corner of his eye, which added an enchanting allure to his already captivating face. I swallowed hard and stared at him in a daze. He's even more handsome than me. Seeing this, the young man slightly curled his thin lips and took 2 steps towards me. "Brother, regarding that life-saving favor, how do you intend to repay me?" He lifted my chin, his thumb gently rubbing the corner of my mouth, his gaze intensely probing. My instincts told me that this person was dangerous. However, no matter how dangerous he was not as dangerous as the zombies. I broke free from his grasping hands and hugged onto his leg, looking at him with utter sincerity. "Young master, could I team up with you? You're so capable. You surely wouldn't mind taking along a burden like me, right?" A dark glint flickered in the young man's eyes. He pressed the muzzle of the gun against my throat and maliciously slid it all the way down my neck. "But you haven't told me yet how I'm supposed to repay your kindness, have you?" I froze in place, daring not move a muscle, terrified that he might accidentally fire and end things right here. Seeing that changing the subject wasn't working, I forced myself to ask, "Then what do you want me to do?" The boy's hand brushed against the back of my neck, his gaze burning with intensity. As they say, when someone saves your life, you owe them your all. So, Brother Carter, don't you already know what I want? I stared blankly at him, and a crazy thought flashed through my mind. Damn, is this guy any different from my crazy roommate? Did he just fall for my good looks? Thinking I had discovered the truth, I immediately wanted to run away, but he was quick on his feet, scooping me up and tossing me over his shoulder before striding steadily toward the dark corner. I quickly covered my mouth, afraid that I would scream and attract the attention of the zombies. Once I was put down, I pushed him away and tried to run, but he easily pulled me back. The young man held me tightly in his arms with a strong sense of possession. "Brother, why are you running? Aren't you afraid of being eaten by zombies?" As he spoke, he hugged me even tighter. Sensing that unspoken danger, I froze in place. My pupils shrank slightly, and I immediately pretended to be dead. However, the gloomy boy didn't give me a chance to escape. His large hand slowly slid down, his tone ambiguous as he asked, "Have you made up your mind, brother? My patience is limited, so don't keep me waiting too long." Unable to play dead any longer, I grabbed his wandering hand tightly, my face filled with panic. "Brother, this is a zombie game, not one of those romance novels." The boy dismissed it with a casual "oh," raised an eyebrow slightly, and spoke mischievously. "So what?" He stared intensely at my lips. "I haven't had the chance to try doing things with you in front of so many zombies yet." I was startled and quickly covered his mouth, glaring at him. "Do you have any idea what kind of wild talk you're spouting?" Ignoring my anger, he pressed his cool lips against my palm and ran his tongue along it in a disturbing manner. Feeling the dampness, I lost all my fight and trembled as I said, "Brother, I'm a straight man." With a smile in his eyes, he held onto my hand, which I tried to pull away and rubbed it affectionately. "But I'm best at turning brothers gay." Unfazed by my shocked and fearful expression, the young man grabbed my waist with a firm hand, his tone threatening. "Have you made up your mind yet? I'm running out of patience." He glanced at the zombies around him, tearing apart other players. His hand moved lower, pressing me firmly against his chest as he said, "Do you want to force me to show you what I can do in front of all these monsters? Or perhaps, Big Brother prefers something more thrilling? Where the hell have I been dumped? Is this guy even speaking human language? I, Carter, have lived this long and never expected that there would be such a perverted man taking a fancy to me. And there are two of them, and what's more, they both want me to marry them. It's simply absurd." Looking at the young man in front of me who was trying to force himself on me, I was furious. I was absolutely livid. So, I rolled up my sleeves suddenly and stared at him fiercely. "I'm warning you, don't push your luck too far, or I'll..." Under his predatory gaze, I gritted my teeth and lunged at that mouth of his. "I'll kiss you to death." As the saying goes, when one is under someone else's roof, one has to bow one's head. Anyway, no one here knows me. To stay alive, it's not unacceptable to make a small sacrifice. I'll keep him on the hook for now. Once I get the antidote, I'm out of here. As long as I get back to the real world, how could he possibly find me? The young man clearly hadn't expected me to kiss him. His expression froze for a moment, and the arm around my waist went stiff. I tried to pull away, but he took control instead, gripping the back of my neck and kissing me deeply. Every part of him seemed to radiate his excitement. Maybe it was just my imagination, but the moment he kissed me back, the movements of the surrounding zombies seemed to pause for a split second. Looking closely, I didn't notice anything abnormal. At this time, a sudden sharp pain came from my lips. The young man pressed his lips against mine, drawing out the blood with a firm suction. He seemed slightly displeased as he murmured, "Brother, you weren't paying attention. You deserve a little punishment." Refusing to back down, I bit him just as hard. After a while, he pressed his forehead against mine, panting, his hot breath washing over my face. My eyes were wet and red as I stared blankly at the blood on his lips. I was the one who made it happen. I want to die, but I felt like someone else deserved to die. The young man licked his lips as if savoring the taste, letting out a low sigh. "Brother's flavor is really good. I really want to kill someone." At this moment, the long-awaited system voice finally rang. "Congratulations, Player Carter. You have earned the achievement for using mental attacks on zombies, obtained a random weapon, unlocked the weapon usage guide, and received a level up reward. Player level, LV2. Weapon, glass rod. Weapon level. Instructions. Using this weapon can cause stimulation to the target, draining their stamina, allowing the user to act as they wish. I looked at the screen like a confused old man on the subway. What is this? Stimulation? Do whatever one wants? What could a broken glass rod possibly do? And when the hell did I attack any zombies? This system is definitely glitched. Like I can do whatever I want? The young man leaned over and pretended to hug me. His unique masculine aura instantly surrounded me. My back instantly stiffened, and I felt extremely uncomfortable all over. He took the glass rod from my hand, his large, well-defined fingers gently tracing its surface. Then, he seemed to think of something. A faint smile touched his lips. He pressed the glass rod against my waist, his gaze intense as he looked at me, his voice low and alluring. Brother, let's try it on you. Okay? Silence. Dead silence. After being stunned for 3 seconds, I promptly hugged him. He can actually hear the system voice in my head. If he's not the chosen one, then who is? I just ignored his heartless words and showered him with compliments. Seeing a smirk tug at the corner of his mouth, I took the opportunity to suggest we team up. The young man's fingers paused as he rubbed the glass rod. He suddenly let out a laugh. Sure. He hooked his arm around my waist and gave a quick kiss on my lips. Then, big brother, you'll have to take responsibility for me. My eyes flickered slightly before I buried my face against his abs, inhaling deeply with a satisfied smile. Absolutely, as long as you protect me. The boy slipped the glass rod away where I couldn't see it. A hint of sickly madness flashed in his eyes. After pestering him persistently, I finally found out the young man's name as I wished. His name is Mason, the Mason meaning a sycophant. I asked him what he had been doing before he was dragged in. He let out a cold snort and feigned indifference, saying, "Nothing much. I just confessed to my brother and got rejected." I paused for a moment, about to laugh out loud, but then met his resentful gaze. I immediately looked away. This zombie is acting way too much like a zombie. Wait a minute. You've got other brothers now, so why are you still trying to scheme against me? I suddenly snapped back to reality, looked at him with confusion, and conveniently dodged a zombie that was about to sneak up on me. Mason turned around and finished it off, then smiled at me with an unreadable expression. Brother, I've always been loyal. I pouted and mimicked his tone to get a beating. I've always been loyal, yeah, right? Then Mason tossed me a gun. I caught it quickly. Seeing the type of gun, I sighed with envy. You really are some kind of privileged heir. How do you even have such advanced gear? Mason raised an eyebrow. Know how to use it. I snorted and puffed out my chest proudly. Of course, I may not have eaten pork, but I've certainly seen a pig run before. Hearing this, Mason clicked his tongue, and a trace of annoyance flashed across his face. Unfortunately, I was so focused on studying the gun in my hand that I didn't have time to care about him. It wasn't until I felt the chill radiating off him that I snapped back to reality, wrapping my arms around the gun and offering a perfunctory reassurance. Don't be mad. It's only natural to get excited handling a real firearm for the first time. Seeing his gaze remain detached as he looked at me, my grip on the gun tightened instinctively. After a moment of hesitation, I reluctantly grabbed his collar and pulled him down for a quick kiss. Will this do? Mason's eyes shifted, his pupils turning a deep red in an instant. Just as I was about to look closer, he pulled me into his arms and kissed me back. The young man nuzzled against my nose, his breathing uneven. I'll let it go this time, but next time, it won't be so easy. My thoughts returned, and the corners of my mouth couldn't help turning up. I felt extremely delighted. I promise there won't be a next time. Mason raised an eyebrow, clearly pleased. I finally got it. He always tried to act like the boss, but his slightly red ears told me he was still a naive and innocent boy inside. Carter realized that with just a little bit of charm, he could easily have Mason right where he wanted him. Later, Mason still took charge and pulled Carter into an embrace, claiming it was to teach him how to use a gun. He was very attentive. If only he hadn't touched everywhere he shouldn't have. Afterward, with my face burning red, I glared at him angrily. He looked like a sly enchantress who had drained me dry, giving me that smug smile. I could see right through him. He was practically begging for a slap. I immediately turned my head away and took out all my frustration on the zombies. Die, you scoundrels! Now that I had a weapon in hand, I became bolder. Carter and Mason cleared out the zombies together, successfully breaking through to reach the underground parking lot. We found a well-preserved off-road vehicle in the parking lot. However, there was an almost imperceptible whimpering sound coming from inside the car, which sounded quite eerie. Carter approached cautiously and discovered that there was another person in the car. He was wearing a white lab coat, frantically fiddling with something while trembling all over, muttering incoherently about not wanting to die. He looked like a lab researcher. I was about to speak to him, but I noticed that his right leg, hidden by the white coat, had suffered severe trauma with significant blood loss and darkening tissue. Mason and I exchanged glances. Just as we were about to shoot him, he suddenly looked up at us. His eyes turned white and swelled, looking like they were about to pop out. Even I, who had seen so many zombies, was startled. The man's voice was shrill and desperate. "Save me! Save me!" But right after he said that, his body began to convulse violently before finally transforming completely into one of the undead, letting out those distinctive guttural sounds. He roared and was about to pounce on us, but he stopped his movements strangely the moment he saw Mason. However, in just an instant, he trembled and pounced on Mason. Seeing Mason standing there without moving, my pupils shrank and I immediately reached out to pull him back. Before I could make a move, Mason let out a cold laugh and grabbed the creature with his bare hands, dragging it out of the car. Then he took out his gun, aimed at the zombie, and shot it in the head. He slowly took out a handkerchief to wipe his hands, tossed it on the ground, and turned to look at me. The young man's eyes held anticipation, as if he wanted to hear something from my mouth. I blinked and mechanically gave a thumbs up. "Well done." Mason raised an eyebrow in good spirits. "Yeah, how about it? Falling for me yet?" While I gave him a speechless look, Mason pulled out some tissues and wiped the bloodstains off the seat clean. I was about to get into the car cheerfully when Mason grabbed me. He pointed the gun at the trunk, his voice chilling. "If you don't want to die, get out. Please, don't kill us." Watching the two people crawl out of the trunk in a messy state, I narrowed my eyes cautiously. Someone had managed to sneak into the trunk while we weren't looking. Seeing us with guns, both of them turned pale with fear. "Brothers, we know you're tough. Please have mercy on us and take your two brothers along." The guy with yellow hair fell to his knees, bowing repeatedly as he pleaded with sincere words. Seeing this, the other man with red hair also knelt down. I pressed my lips together. At this moment, I couldn't trust anyone, since no one knew if they would turn on us to survive. So, we rejected their request. But unexpectedly, just as I put away my gun and was about to get in the car, they rushed up from behind and held a dagger to my neck. Mason reacted quickly and subdued the red-haired guy. I was in a bad situation. A blade sliced my neck, causing me to cry out in pain as blood flowed, but fortunately, the injury wasn't deep. The blonde man holding me hostage threatened Mason into freeing his friend and driving them to downtown. Mason's eyes were gloomy, with a storm that could destroy everything gathering in them. But in the end, he smiled, which was a bit creepy. After glancing at the mark on my neck, he said calmly, "All right." With a creepy grin, the guy with yellow hair shoved me into the back seat. That was it. The four of us headed toward the city center together. The red-haired guy, who had just been injured by Mason, sat in the front passenger seat. He patted his face with the gun he had taken, looking smug as he flashed a set of yellow teeth. "You were so cocky just now, weren't you? Now you have to listen to us like good little boys." As he spoke, he glanced over at me, bound in the back seat like a hostage. His murky eyes were filled with bloodshot veins. "This pretty boy isn't bad looking. If things weren't so urgent right now, I'd really take care of you properly." Upon hearing this, the blonde-haired man holding me up also used his dagger to lift my chin and take a look. His eyes held the same creepy expression. "Looks decent enough. This face is almost pretty enough for a girl." I turned my head away with a sense of grievance and anger. I cursed inwardly. Two perverted freaks. I wonder what kind of terrible things they did before being pulled into this game. Why didn't the zombies eat them? Just then, the temperature inside the car dropped suddenly. Immediately afterwards, I heard Mason's gloomy laughter. "Reckless, The redhead in the passenger seat instantly flew into a rage, pressing the gun barrel against his temple and glaring fiercely. "What did you just say, kid? Looking for trouble?" But the next second, Mason wrenched the steering wheel violently. While the man was struggling to steady himself and cursing, Mason snatched the knife from his waist and drove it precisely into his body. Mason's eyes were sinister. He tightened his grip on the dagger and twisted it forcefully. Then he quickly pulled it out and mercilessly stabbed it into his throat. The man covered his throat, his eyes wide open, looking extremely miserable in death. Seeing his friend fall, the blonde-haired man's eyes filled with fear. Realizing there was no escape, he swung his knife wildly toward me, his face twisted in rage. "Die!" My pupils shrank. I quickly dodged backward, but because the distance was too close, I could only watch helplessly as the dagger came toward me. Just then, my vision flashed. It was actually Mason who grabbed the dagger with his bare hands. The blade cut into his hand, and dark blood dripped onto my face. My eyes narrowed, anger surging within me. Finally breaking free from the ropes I'd been slicing for ages, I quickly kicked out hard at the blonde guy. Then I grabbed the attacker's hand behind his back and drove that bloody dagger deep into his palm. The blonde guy screamed in pain and collapsed onto the seat. I looked at Mason, my gaze falling on his bleeding hand, brows furrowed tightly. "Are you okay?" Mason stared at me blankly before smiling. "I'm fine. It's impossible to be fine." The blood on his hand was almost soaking through his cuff. Mason seemed to feel no pain as he turned his gaze toward the blonde-haired guy, a cold killing intent in his eyes. Just as he was about to take action to get rid of him, I stopped him. Mason looked at me, his tone chilling. "He hurt you." I held his bleeding hand, my heart aching with a dull pain. I gritted my teeth and said, "Letting him die like this would be letting him off too easy." The gloomy young man was silent for a moment before he let go. I broke one of the bandit's legs and threw him, along with his accomplice, onto the highway. Ignoring his curses, I left with Mason in a swaggering manner. In the rearview mirror, a horde of zombies came charging toward them, swallowing the two men in an instant. Then they chased after us. Thankfully, the SUV Mason had picked out performed well, letting us shake off that horde of zombies shortly after. Sitting in the passenger seat, my gaze kept drifting to Mason's injured hand, the one he'd hurt while saving me. It was odd. It seemed like he didn't feel any pain at all. I scratched my head in frustration, then found some clean gauze and alcohol in the medical kit the doctor had used. Just as I was about to grab his hand and give him a simple bandage, he suddenly hit the brakes and snatched those things from me. I clicked my tongue in mild annoyance. "Look at you, how badly are you hurt, and you're still being stubborn? Let your big brother bandage you up." But with a cold expression, he dodged my hand, gripped the back of my head, and pulled me closer. I stared at him in confusion, not knowing what was going on. It wasn't until I felt a sting on my neck that I realized I still had an injury there. Mason cold-facedly disinfected my neck with alcohol. Although his face was gloomy, his movements were extremely gentle, for fear of hurting me. Once he finished wrapping my neck, he tossed the medical kit aside carelessly and stepped on the gas to continue driving. Seeing his hand gripping the steering wheel so tightly that the bleeding seemed to quicken, I frowned. I grabbed his hand and started bandaging it. As he cleaned the wound, he muttered under his breath, "You've got quite the temper." He paused for a moment, turning to look at me. Seeing my serious and focused expression, the corners of his eyes softened slightly. Suddenly, he leaned in closer. "Are you worried about me?" My hands paused as I wrapped the bandage around his arm before quickly finishing and letting go of his hand. I turned my gaze to the window without looking at him. "Who cares about you? I'm just afraid that if you die, no one will be there to protect me. Focus on the road." Mason's lips curled into a faint smile as he turned his gaze forward. I wasn't sure if he had actually believed me or not. After a long silence, Mason suddenly spoke up. "Carter, don't get hurt again, or I'll make you regret it." Seeing that I didn't say a word, he turned his head to look at me. He noticed me leaning back in the seat, fast asleep. I was drooling a bit. When I finally woke up, we had already arrived in the city center. Looking at the towering SD headquarters building, I was both excited and nervous. I caught a glimpse of my own reflection in the rearview mirror, lips still red and swollen, and my expression darkened. I glared at Mason, gritting my teeth as I demanded, "Are you a dog or something? Always in heat." Mason hummed in agreement, licking his lips as if savoring the memory. His gaze lingered on a certain private area of mine with an ambiguous, somewhat creepy intensity before he asked, "I could bite other places too. Wanna try, brother?" I choked up for a moment and quickly covered myself. A flush of heat rose in my chest, making my face turn ugly as I snapped, "Get lost." He wasn't angry. He gave a rascally smile and continued driving. But I never expected that, less than a kilometer from the SD Group headquarters building, we would run into a horde of zombies. We originally decided to take a detour to avoid arousing suspicion. Just as we were about to leave, a bullet struck the glass of an abandoned car next to us. In the next instant, the zombies that had been gathered around a building suddenly turned their attention toward us. At the same time, there came cries for help from ahead. "Hey! Please help us." There were 7 or 8 survivors on the 7-story building opposite, which was surrounded by zombies and being watched closely. They kept waving at us, trying to catch our attention. Just now, the sound has already attracted the zombies. We didn't have time to save them anyway. Moreover, we won't save them either. Watching the undead sprinting toward us in a frenzy, Mason's eyes turned to ice. He jerked the steering wheel sharply and changed direction to make our escape. When the survivors realized we were leaving, they grew frantic with desperation. Then, a tall man stepped forward. With anger in his eyes, he raised his gun and fired at us without hesitation. The car window was shattered, and I instinctively blocked it with my arm. Several shards of glass pierced through. I cursed under my breath and quickly pulled the glass out, tossing it outside the window. Mason looked at my wound, his gaze suddenly turning dark and intense. He glanced at the group in the rearview mirror, his tone chilling. "You're asking for it." I was still cursing and brainstorming for a way to escape. But when I turned back, I found that the zombies chasing us suddenly changed direction and ran toward the building they had just surrounded. They climbed up along the drain pipes, marching toward the roof in a human pyramid formation. Seeing this, those few people turned pale with fear. They kept shooting at the zombies. But there were swarms of zombies, while their bullets were limited. Finally, when they ran out of ammunition, they could only watch helplessly as the zombies got closer and closer. Finally, they were knocked down by the zombies. I stared at the scene in disbelief. Why aren't they chasing us? However, Mason stepped on the brake and slowly cleaned my wounds bit by bit. He glanced coldly at the rooftop swallowed by the horde in the rearview mirror and said flatly, "Maybe those people's scent was just more to their liking. You're really straightforward." After escaping the horde, we took a detour for half an hour before finally reaching the SD Group headquarters. The building towered into the clouds and was magnificent, but the lobby was in a terrible state of disrepair, with corpses and blood everywhere. Some of the corpses looked just like ordinary people, but large holes had been gouged out from different parts of their bodies. Seeing this devastation, it was clear that other players had already reached here. Moreover, these players were incredibly formidable. They could accurately identify high-level mutated zombies hiding among the survivors and locate their core crystals to trade for weapons. They were definitely not someone to underestimate. Thinking of this, I furrowed my brow. We need to speed up. There are only 7 antidotes, and we have to get 2 of them. David paused for a moment, then suddenly looked at me. "If I don't manage to get an antidote, will you just watch me die, brother?" What kind of question is this? Mason is so strong. I never thought he would fail to get the key. I patted his shoulder, not caring much. "Nonsense. How could you fail? If anyone might fail, it'd be me. But with you here, we'll definitely all make it out." I expected Mason to keep his usual cold expression, but instead, his eyes suddenly lit up. He grabbed my hand and brought it to his lips, so excited he seemed almost wild. "It seems Big Brother doesn't want me to die. Big Brother wants to stay with me, right?" Mason's gaze was so intense it felt like it might burn me. I knew it. Big Brother has me in his heart. I stared at him in shock, completely baffled by how he came to that conclusion. Mason leaned down and kissed my lip, his tone unusually possessive. "Brother made a promise to me, so he can't back out now." I opened my mouth to speak. "No, shoot." Mason placed a finger against my lips, his gaze suddenly turning cold as his expression grew dark. "Don't make me angry, brother, or brother won't be able to leave." He gave a strange smile, grabbed my hand firmly, and intertwined our fingers. At that time, I didn't yet understand the deeper meaning behind his words. I just stood there dazed as he led me forward, step by steady step toward the top floor. On the way, we didn't encounter any other players. The ground was covered with the bodies of zombies. We didn't run into any other players until we reached the Saint floor. They were leaning against the wall, eating bread from their hands. Noticing someone approach, they suddenly raised their guns and pointed them at us, looking extremely vigilant. Mason hated having a gun pointed at him the most, and he was about to take them out right then. I managed to hold him back in time and explained the situation to those players, perfectly preventing a shootout. I breathed a sigh of relief, felt something hard against my chest, and only then realized I was still holding Mason. Quickly let go, awkwardly scratched my head with a slight blush, and said sorry I forgot. Mason's originally bad mood instantly improved. He raised an eyebrow and lightly hooked his finger under my chin, teasing, "If brother wanted to hug me so much, you could have just said so. There's no need for such excuses." He spread his arms wide, looking every bit the daring tempter. I choked for a moment, heat rushing to my face as I quickly turned away. "Who wants to hug you? Strange, whose heartbeat is so loud? It's bothering me, it's disturbing me." Mason hummed in response, then suddenly lifted the hem of his shirt and firmly grabbed my hand, placing it against his abs. His skin was warm, hot enough to make me want to pull back, but he held on tight. "Are you satisfied, brother?" My face instantly flushed red. I shot him a glare and said, "What are you doing? There are so many people around. Let go of me." God only knew what kind of looks those people were giving us. Mason glanced at the few people who were bowing their heads and eating bread, then asked seriously, "Does brother mean that if there were no one else around, I could touch you freely? I'll go kill them right now." I grabbed him and hissed, "You're insane. If you've got brain issues, go get them checked out." Mason frowned, looking a bit aggrieved. "How could brother bear to scold me? Not only do I scold you, but I also want to beat you to death." But I didn't dare say it, since Mason was capable of anything. "Carter?" I paused for a moment, wondering if someone was calling me. Following the sound, I saw several men in black combat gear walking toward us from the stairwell. They wore helmets and had cloths covering their faces. The man at the front stared fixedly at me, looking quite shocked. "Carter, it's really you. I've missed you so much." Overjoyed, he raised his gun and strode toward me with excitement. However, just as he was about to reach me, a tall figure blocked my path. Mason looked at him with cold eyes and an unfriendly tone. "Take one more step, and you die. The man was stunned and actually stopped right where he stood. He looked at Mason in bewilderment, blinked confusedly, suddenly tilted his head, peered past Mason to look at me, lifted his hand to remove the cloth covering his face, and revealed a bright smile. "Carter, it's me, Samuel." "Samuel?" I widened my eyes and studied his face carefully. It was really him, my best friend, the one who used to game with me before being pulled into this zombie survival scenario. Thrilled by the encounter, I immediately pushed past Mason and started catching up with Samuel. I paid no attention to the man behind me, whose expression had turned dark as he stared fixedly at my back. Just then, the system voice rang out. "Congratulations to player Carter for achieving the milestone against hostile entities. You have been awarded a random weapon and unlocked its usage guide, along with an upgrade in your rank. Player level, LV7. Weapon, Divine Punishment Whip. Weapon level, Hesitant Face class. Usage instructions. This weapon can deal fatal damage to the target." I looked at the barbs on the whip and nodded in satisfaction. This is way better than that mess of glass rods, handcuffs, ankle bells, collars, and other junk from before. I always felt that the system was messing with me before, but now it's much better. Has the system finally had a conscience? However, did I attack the zombies just now? Moreover, it was a mental attack. Is the system glitching again? I clicked my tongue, silently cursing the system for being insane. Since I couldn't figure it out anyway, I just decided to let it go. I was eager to share the weapon I'd just acquired with Mason, but instead found him staring at me with a gloomy expression. Seeing that I had finally noticed him, Mason let out a frustrated laugh. "Come here." I shrank my neck back slightly, just about to go over and calm down this irritable tiger, but Samuel grabbed me and invited me to join their squad. I hesitated for a moment, about to answer him when a large group of infected came charging in from the stairwell. Startled, I immediately grabbed my gun ready to fire, but my wrist was yanked with great force, and I suddenly lost position relative to Samuel. Mason, who had appeared without me noticing, pulled me into an embrace and discreetly created distance between me and Samuel, saying coldly, "Let's go." With so many infected around, we definitely couldn't win in a fight. I grabbed onto Mason, wanting to call Samuel and the others along with us, but the zombies that suddenly appeared between me and Samuel blocked my way. Mason held me firmly and carried me toward another path. His voice was cold. "It's too late. You don't trust Samuel that much, do you? If he dies, it just proves he's useless." For some reason, I could detect a hint of disdain in his voice, and out of my sight, Mason watched Samuel fighting for his life against the zombies, a cruel smile curling on his lips. By the time Mason brought me to the th floor, a crowd had already gathered outside the laboratory. A battle was about to begin. Once the lab door was breached, a few of the leaders rushed in with their guns drawn. They were on high alert, missing nothing. I also wanted to go in, but Mason stopped me. I looked at him in confusion, a bit anxious. If they get it first, won't we be left with nothing? Could be fatal. Mason didn't answer. Instead, he gently ruffled my hair, his expression serious. "Carter, can I ask you something?" Watching the figures disappear into the distance, my unease grew. "Go ahead and ask." The boy pinched my earlobe, his voice carrying a dangerous edge. "Once we get out, would you be willing to stay by my side?" I was stunned, my mind going blank, and suddenly felt guilty. "Why talk about this now? We'll figure it out once we're out." Mason smiled, his dark eyes shining with anticipation. "Then is it true that you promised to take responsibility for me?" I patted his shoulder, looking at him strangely. "You're acting weird. Our main priority right now is getting the antidote. Once I get it, I'll tell you what you want to know, okay?" The light in Mason's eyes dimmed a bit. He pulled his hand back, looking serious. "Brother, please don't lie to me this time either, or I'll really get upset." At that moment, the sound of gunfire and terrified screams came from the laboratory. When we went inside, we found that everyone who had just entered was lying on the ground, their eyes wide open, lifeless. I was so frightened that I stumbled backward and almost fell. Fortunately, Mason hugged me in time. I grabbed his arm, looking around with a trembling voice. "There's no one here. How did they die?" Mason suddenly pointed to a spot. "It's there." Following his gaze, I met a pair of blood-red eyes. It was an undead white rat. It stared at me intensely, baring its teeth as if it were about to bite my throat out any second. I was startled and hid myself in Mason's arms. He rested his chin on my shoulder. "Don't be afraid, brother. It won't hurt you. Didn't you want to leave? Go get it. The antidote is in that box." I swallowed hard, glanced at the cooler beneath the rodent, then looked back at the frightening little mouse before decisively shaking my head. There's a big difference between being forced to die and seeking death on your own. Mason smiled. "Brother is still so timid." Saying that, he waved his hand toward the little mouse. The rodent squeaked and then scurried away. I looked at him in shock. "You're a freak of nature, Carter. You can control zombie rats too?" Mason smirked as he stepped over the players who had met their end in gruesome ways, pulling me close to his chest as we walked toward the cooler. He held my hand and pressed the password in one digit at a time. Password accepted. The cooler emitted a cold, mechanical voice that sent a chill down my spine. That sound, it sounds like the system voice of this zombie game. It was eerie and unsettling. I leaned into Mason's arms, trying to get a little warmth. Mason opened the glass door and braced his hands on both sides, trapping me between him and the refrigerator. "Take it, brother." His voice was low and magnetic, gently stirring my heart. Looking at the 7 neatly arranged vials in the box, my heart pounded hard. Finally, it was within reach. But wouldn't it be too easy? I frowned, a bad feeling lingering in my mind. I took 3 vials out and carefully examined them in my palms before turning to hand one to Mason. "Take it, my good partner." Mason glanced indifferently at the vial but didn't take it. Instead, he looked at me, his eyes darkening as he said, "Now that you've got the pass key, Brother Carter, can you tell me, will you be with me after we get out?" My hand holding the vial stiffened. I was a bit afraid to look at him. Carter." But Samuel's voice suddenly came, interrupting me. I suddenly felt relieved, but I didn't notice Mason's gaze turning cold, filled with hostility towards Samuel. I had planned to go help Samuel, but Mason held me firmly in place. Brother, you haven't given me an answer yet. He was so stubborn, insisting on getting an answer. It seemed that if I didn't tell him, he wouldn't let go. I gritted my teeth and gathered the courage to look at him. I'm sorry, but I can't be with you. After saying that, I hugged my head and didn't dare to look at his face. But why did my heart suddenly ache so much? Even though I knew I didn't like him, was it because I had hurt the person in front of me? At this time, the system voice rang again. Congratulations, Player Carter. You have unlocked the mental attack on zombies achievement. You received a random weapon and its usage guide. Your player level has been upgraded. Player level, LV10. Weapon, Golden Dagger. Weapon level, SSS level. Usage instructions. This weapon can eliminate any creature within the game. However, I couldn't listen anymore. Only later did Mason smile. He lifted his hand to cup my face, his tone growing increasingly eerie. Is it because of that, Samuel? Does brother like him? Of course not. Hearing that, I immediately shook my head to deny it. Mason let out a scoffing laugh, his gaze falling on what I was tightly gripping in my hand, and he said self-deprecatingly, if you don't like him, then why help him carry this potion? I paused for a moment, bit my lip, and muttered softly, but I also got one for you. He remained silent, staring at me intently. I tugged at his cuff. Mason, Samuel is my friend, and you are too. I don't want to see him get hurt, nor do I want to see you get hurt. Let's just go outside and talk first. Okay. Mason lowered his eyes, a dark and dangerous intensity flashing in the depths. Seeing him remain silent, I firmly pressed the antidote into his hand. I handed one to Samuel as well. The remaining ones had already been taken by other players. Now, all we need to do is break this antidote, and we can return to the real world. But right then, something unexpected happened. The vials suddenly halted in mid-air. Before anyone could react, the vials burst open right there. However, those players, including Samuel, didn't leave the game world. Mine didn't explode. It just flew into Mason's hand. I stared at him in disbelief. He ran his long, pale fingers along the tube. His pitch-black eyes slowly shifted to a strange, crimson hue. A faint smile touched the young man's lips as he spoke in a lazy tone. Everyone is being so rude, visiting someone's home, and expecting to just leave without even saying goodbye? Just as everyone stood there stunned and confused, the surroundings suddenly transformed. We found ourselves surrounded by a horde of infected. Seeing the dense crowd of creatures charging at us with guttural roars, I froze in place out of fear. Mason wrapped his arms around me from behind, and his chillingly cold lips pressed against my neck for a tender kiss. I stiffened my body and didn't dare to move. The enchanting and deadly young man hugged my waist and kissed me while directing the zombies to devour the other players. Brother, you lied to me. You promised you'd stay with me. He gently bit my earlobe and spoke in a lingering voice. It doesn't matter. As long as brother stays here with me forever. Looking at the decaying flesh on my waist, my face turned pale. Damn it! No one told me that this naughty young man in front of me was the zombie king. My throat bobbed, and my voice trembled slightly. Could you let Samuel go? Mason paused his kiss, suddenly baring his teeth as he bit hard into my collarbone. I hissed in pain, certain that it had drawn blood. He chuckled low, his aura chillingly cold. Brother, you know exactly how to anger me. My heart gave a painful throb. The next second, I saw Samuel, who was desperately rushing toward me, get tackled by a zombie. Immediately afterwards, 2, 3, 4. I stared in wide-eyed horror, screaming, Samuel. Mason grabbed my shoulders, spun me around, and gripped my chin to force me to look at him. Brother, when will you finally show some mercy for me? His eyes were bloodshot, and the right side of his face was rotting and bloody, with bone showing. He looked nothing like that elegant and noble young man he had been just moments ago. Mason held my hand against his ruined face, nuzzling it with deep dependence. Brother, I'm in so much pain. Please, just hurt me a little. Let me feel something. I hadn't even recovered from the shock of Samuel's death. I didn't hear a word he said. After a moment, I stared at him fixedly, my voice trembling as I asked, Why Why did you drag us into this game? Mason didn't get what he wanted to hear from me, so he let out a self-deprecating laugh. His eyes filled with an intense obsession. Because you don't love me. Turned out that Mason was David. He was just an ordinary person in this zombie game world. After the zombie virus broke out, he got infected and his body began to decay, but he kept his consciousness intact. He watched his relatives and friends turn into zombies one by one. In extreme despair, he chose to jump off a building. Just then, a small white mouse found him and led him to the SD Corporation headquarters lab, where he was given a serum that allowed him to blend in with normal people. He became the Zombie King. He kept completing the missions assigned by the game system, eliminating all the players dragged in. Until one day, I was pulled in as well. He fell in love with me, but the system forced him to kill me. That was the first time Mason defied the system's rules and even took control of it. On that occasion, I deceived him. I used him to return to the real world. When he couldn't wait for me, he followed me into the real world and became my roommate, David. Since I didn't love him, he kept pulling me back into the game world, over and over again, forcing me to fall for him. But every time, I'd forget him. This time was no different. Mason held me tightly, his voice tinged with a sense of grievance. You're too stubborn, brother. I only have to use this method to make you look at me even once. Even though you keep forgetting and rejecting me over and over again. I opened my mouth, but not a single word came out. Mason's voice cracked as he said, Brother, why do you still not love me? Am I really that unbearable? Looking into his hurt eyes, my heart ached with a dull pain. I really want to tell him. Actually, I had already stopped being so hostile toward him a long time ago. To be honest, I even started to develop some feelings for him. But he killed my friend and took so many innocent lives along the way. So, I'm sorry. I closed my eyes, and a single tear slipped down the side of his neck. Mason let out a low grunt. I stabbed Mason in the chest from behind with the golden dagger that could kill all creatures in the game. That's where his crystal core is. The game system just told me. It said that as long as I killed him, I could return to the real world. Mason glanced down at the dagger in his chest, and his arms holding me trembled. He tugged at the corner of his mouth, cupped my face, pressed his forehead against mine, and his eyes were full of grievance. Brother, you'd rather believe that broken system than trust me. The broken young man gave a self-mocking smile. Actually, even if you didn't kill me, I would let you leave. I love you so much. How could I bear to keep you in this rotten world? My eyelids fluttered slightly, and an indescribable ache filled my heart. It seems that there is also a trace of regret. Mason, the young man gently interrupted me, his eyes glistening with tears. Brother, if I hadn't harmed those people, would we still have a chance to meet again? Would you accept me? The young man in front of me was no longer as naughty as usual. Now he was innocent and pitiful. I bit my lip tightly. We won't meet again. The system said that any creature killed by the golden dagger would never come back. But my eyes were red as I covered his chattering lips. I held him tightly, breathing in his scent, and choked out, I will. Congratulations to player Carter for achieving the Eliminate the Zombie King achievement. You have successfully completed the game and are about to leave the game. I looked into his eyes with a serious expression. Mason, I will. This time, I didn't lie to him. Mason froze for a moment, hardly able to believe it. Brother, you really promised. His eyes were slightly red-rimmed, and he bit me hard. He bit down harder than he ever had before. Mason urgently kissed the blood on my lips, holding me tightly in his arms as if trying to merge us together forever. Immediately afterwards, little white lights emerged from the young man's body. He kissed my eyes, a faint smile touching his lips. Goodbye, brother. This time, please don't lie to me again. Mason was gone. I returned to the real world. But what I didn't expect was that, as soon as I woke up, I got a call from Samuel. He went on and on about something, but I barely listened. I only knew one thing. Samuel was still alive. However, he forgot everything in the game world. He had only vague memories of taking down numerous infected and a man who seemed hostile toward him, making him think it was just a dream. My heart pounded hard. So, the system had been lying to him. Even if I died in the game, the real world wouldn't just vanish. Does that mean Mason is still alive? A spark of joy lit up my heart. With a mix of hope and anxiety, I immediately went to find Mason. I want to tell him that I like him, but I couldn't find him. His phone was disconnected, and he wasn't in my line contacts either. No one else had any impression of David at all. It was as if he had never existed. I searched for any traces of his existence, but found nothing. And the person in the bunk above me now was someone I had never met before. But the roommates said that he has always lived with us. They even told me I was talking nonsense and that I probably just hadn't slept well. I'm very desperate, but clearly David exists. Why don't they remember him? Could it be true, just as they said, that I'm merely having a dream? At this moment, I suddenly thought of something. I rushed into the bathroom. Looking at myself in the mirror, I pulled open my collar to expose my collarbone. There was a mark there. I reached out with trembling fingers, pressed it lightly, and winced at the pain. A smile touched my lips as tears gathered in the corners of my eyes. I knew David was real, and Mason had to be alive too. He was just angry with me and didn't want to see me right now. It doesn't matter. I can wait for him. I'll wait for as long as it takes. Just like this, days passed by one, until I graduated from college. Mason never showed up, but I didn't give up. I kept updating my social media, posting about the happy moments I experienced and the beautiful scenery I came across. I thought that since he was so crazy and paranoid and loved me so much, he must be secretly following me. I wanted him to know that I was waiting for him. After graduating from college, I joined an internet company. I became a game development engineer. One day, our boss asked us to develop a zombie-themed game. The main villain was the Zombie King, hiding among the players. His task is to eliminate all the players and become the absolute ruler of the zombie world. This familiar plot instantly reminded me of Mason. While I was lost in thought, my boss tapped on my desk. He said that I would be in charge of this project. After that, I would have to report to the president in person. I was stunned for a moment. Isn't it usually the managers who report directly to the president? Why would they ask someone like me, just a low-level employee, this time around? I'd heard that the newly appointed president had a peculiar temperament and very high standards. He often gave employees who went to report their work a thorough dressing down. I felt a bit anxious, but I accepted the task anyway, resigning myself to it. For the first time, I went over all the documents 4 or 5 times from start to finish, terrified of making any mistakes and getting scolded by the president. When I arrived at the president's office and met with a few of his assistants, he said that this project was in my charge. They told me that the CEO had been in a really bad mood today. This made me even less courageous, but there was nothing I could do. In the end, I still found myself standing in front of the office door. Taking a deep breath, I knocked on the door. A moment later, a clear, masculine voice came from inside. "Come in." I pushed open the door and saw a man in a well-tailored, high-end custom-made black suit. He was sitting at his desk, with his back to me. Even from a distance, I could feel the chill in his aura, but that silhouette seemed vaguely familiar. I shook my head, pulled myself together, and walked over. "Hello, President. I'm Carter, an engineer from the game development department. I'm here to report on the development progress of the zombie game." At this time, the elegant and noble man let out a soft laugh, with a deep and pleasant voice. I froze for a moment, unsure of the president's temperament. I had no choice but to pluck up my courage and ask, "What are your instructions, sir?" The man lifted his slender, well-defined hand and tapped his forehead. His voice was magnetic and alluring as he said, "Brother, long time no see. You seem even more charming." He turned around, revealing a face that I was all too familiar with. The small red mole beneath his eye corner left a deep impression on me. He stood up and walked over to where I was, standing just 3 centimeters taller than me. He looked down at me with a gentle expression. "Brother, you're finally here. I've missed you so much. I've waited for you for so long, far too long." As he said that, he pulled me into a tight embrace while I was still trying to process what was happening. The overwhelming joy almost clouded my mind. The laptop and documents in my hands all fell to the ground. I held him back tightly. I couldn't quite believe it. It was him. He wasn't dead. Tears welled up in my eyes, barely under control. Mason said that originally he planned to have me even if he couldn't win my heart. But he has his principles and never forces anyone to do something they don't want to. That's why he kept pulling me into the game over and over again, just so I would fall in love with him. Mason tilted my chin up, his eyes looking hurt. It's a pity that you're so cold-hearted. Even with such an outstanding and handsome man like me standing right in front of you, you remain unmoved and so cruel, deceiving me time after time. I felt a bit guilty, although I couldn't remember how many times he pulled me into the game and what I had experienced. But I knew that, given my nature, I would definitely come up with ways to deceive him. Feeling uneasy under his gaze, I grabbed his hand and traced the scar left from saving me before hesitantly asking, "Then, should I make it up to you?" Mason's eyes lit up. "Really?" I nodded slightly. "Of course. I promised not to lie to you anymore." However, by nightfall, I already regretted it. Mason pinned me to the bed and went through every weapon I had drawn in the game earlier, testing them one by one on me. With my hands cuffed to the headboard and one foot resting on Mason's shoulder, my voice came out hoarse. "Mason, I can't do this anymore. Please let me go." Who would have thought those props were meant for something like this? Mason lifted his head, the corners of his eyes tinged with red. "Brother, a man never says he's done." Then he continued to work hard. I was already exhausted and could only accept my fate. Mason pulled the pity card, and I fell right into his trap. Whenever I got angry, he would act hurt and bring up things that happened in the game world. I felt so guilty and heartbroken. I just let him do it. But the man, deeply insecure in his heart, kept asking me over and over again, "Brother, do you love me?" Every time this happened, I would tell him patiently, "Mason, I love you,